A janitor's daughter answered a phone call that wasn't for her and saved a ruthless millionaire from a $100 million scam. This is the story of how a 12-year-old girl, in one afternoon, demolished the cruel empire of arrogance a powerful man had built over a lifetime. Arthur Blackwood, a titan of industry, saw people as mere ants scurrying beneath his feet and enjoyed humiliating those he considered inferior. On this fateful day, he decided to make an example of a humble janitor and her daughter using his most important contract. But what happened when he stumbled and his private line rang? Why did New York's most feared man suddenly need saving by a child? And what devastating secret was about to be exposed by the voice on the phone, changing all of their lives forever? Before we dive in, if you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Now let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. Arthur Blackwood, at 65 years of age, had constructed his life with the same cold precision he used to construct his skyscrapers. His world was one of numbers on a screen, lines on a graph, and a satisfying, silent accumulation of wealth. He did not measure his days in sunrises or sunsets, but in market openings and closings. He had never been one to count his blessings. He counted his dollars, and by that metric, he was the most blessed man on earth. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of his office on the 90th floor of the Blackwood Tower. It was a position he occupied often. From this height, New York City ceased to be a place of people and became a magnificent, abstract map of his own success. The cars below were a silent, flowing river of metallic insects. The people were less than that. They were dust, invisible, irrelevant, and that was exactly how he preferred it. He was the architect of this steel and glass forest, and he had no interest in the lives of the ants crawling at its roots. His personal life was a testament to this cultivated emptiness. His wife, Eleanor, had left him 20 years ago. He could still remember her final words, spoken not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. "There's no room in this life for me, Arthur," she had said, standing in the doorway of their cavernous, art-filled apartment. "You filled all the space with yourself." He had let her go without a fight. A struggling marriage was an inefficiency, and he had no time for it. He had no children. His company was his only heir, a cold and demanding child that consumed all his time and passion. His employees were not colleagues. They were instruments. His senior executives, men with prestigious degrees and six-figure salaries, lived in a constant state of low-grade terror. They knew that a single misstep, a single quarter of missed projections, could result in their professional extinction. Arthur's greatest pleasure, a secret and petty indulgence, was not in the signing of a billion-dollar deal, but in the small, intimate moments of dominance. He enjoyed watching a confident young vice president crumble under a barrage of questions. He savored the way a seasoned partner would perspire while trying to defend a flawed strategy. These moments reaffirmed his position at the top of the food chain. A soft, deferential chime sounded from the intercom on his vast desk. The desk was a single, massive slab of black Italian marble, a dark, reflective void in the center of the room. "Mr. Blackwood," came the voice of his executive assistant, Helen. He had employed her for 15 years. He knew she had a husband and 2 children, a boy and a girl. He had never once asked for their names. "Yes, Helen, what is it?" he said, his tone clipped and impatient. "Maria Rossi from the night cleaning staff is here. You asked me to bring her up. Send her in," Arthur commanded, turning from the window. He composed his face into a mask of bored, regal indifference. He had seen the woman in the hallway earlier, a child trailing behind her. A clear violation of company policy. It was a minor infraction, but it was an opportunity. An opportunity to remind someone of the rules, to remind someone of their place. Miles away from the sterile grandeur of the 90th floor, Maria Rossi's day had begun as it always did, in the pre-dawn gray of a cramped Brooklyn apartment. Her world was not one of sweeping vistas and silent, air-conditioned spaces. It was a world of the rumbling radiator, the scent of toast and strong coffee, and the quiet, fierce love she held for her daughter. Maria worked 2 jobs. By day, she cleaned houses in a wealthy suburb. By night, she was part of the crew that polished and scrubbed the Blackwood Tower, rendering it pristine for the important people who would occupy it the next day. Her life was a carefully balanced equation of bus schedules, budgets, and a constant, bone-deep weariness. Yet, she rarely complained. Her daughter, Sophia, was the bright sun at the center of her universe. And for her, no amount of work was too much. That morning, as Maria was packing Sophia's lunch, the phone rang. It was the principal of Sophia's middle school. His voice was rushed, apologetic. "Mrs. Rossi, I'm so sorry for the short notice. A water main has burst in the basement. We have to close the school for the day. You'll need to come pick up Sophia." A wave of panic washed over Maria. Her neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who usually helped in emergencies, was in bed with a terrible flu. Her day job client was a new one. She couldn't possibly cancel. The only option left was the one she dreaded. She would have to take Sophia with her to the Blackwood Tower. She knew it was against the rules, but what choice did she have? "It will be okay, Mama," Sophia had said, sensing her mother's distress. Sophia, at 12, possessed a quiet composure that often felt older than her years. Her greatest love was books. Her backpack was always heavy with novels and textbooks borrowed from the public library. She saw the world as a series of fascinating puzzles and stories waiting to be understood. The journey into Manhattan was a study in contrasts. They sat on the rumbling subway, Sophia engrossed in a thick book about economic theory, Maria's mind racing with anxiety. When they finally emerged into the sunlight, they stood at the foot of the Blackwood Tower. It was a monument of dark glass and shining steel, so tall it seemed to scrape the clouds. It was a place of immense power and wealth, a place where her mother became invisible every night, a ghost with a mop and bucket. They entered the lobby. It was a cavern of marble and echoing silence. Men and women in expensive suits strode purposefully across the polished floors, their faces set with importance. Maria, in her simple coat, and Sophia, in her school uniform, felt small and out of place. Maria showed her employee ID to the stern security guard, explaining the situation in a low, apologetic voice. He waved them through with a grunt of disapproval. They took a service elevator to the staff locker room in the basement. Maria changed into her neat, gray uniform. "You will stay here, Sophia," she instructed, her voice firm. "You could do your homework. Do not leave this room. Do not make any noise. It is very important." Sophia nodded, settling onto a hard bench with her book. But hours later, a supervisor found her. He was a man who enjoyed the small power his position gave him. He declared her presence a major security risk and insisted that Maria bring the child to the 90th floor to be officially reprimanded by Mr. Blackwood's office. And so, Maria, her heart pounding with dread, had led her daughter into the lion's den. The door to Arthur Blackwood's office opened with a soft, expensive sigh. Maria entered, her hand clutching Sophia's. The room was larger than their entire apartment. One wall was the city itself. The other walls were adorned with cold, abstract paintings that looked like angry splashes of color. In the center, Arthur Blackwood stood like a statue, a figure of immense and intimidating authority. "Mrs. Rossi," Arthur began, his voice as cool and hard as the marble of his desk. He did not invite them to sit. The 2 plush leather chairs facing his desk might as well have been museum pieces. "It has come to my attention that you brought your daughter to work with you today. You are aware this is a direct violation of company policy, are you not?" Maria's face flushed. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. I am very sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Her school was closed. An emergency. I had no other choice. "There is always a choice, Mrs. Rossi," Arthur countered, circling them slowly, his expensive shoes making no sound on the thick, gray carpet. "People like you are defined by the poor choices you make. It is a cycle of irresponsibility. It is why you are where you are, and I am where I am." He stopped and looked down at Sophia. "What is your name, child?" Sophia looked at her mother, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "My name is Sophia, Sir, she said, her voice clear and steady. Arthur's gaze lingered on her for a moment, a flicker of something, annoyance, surprise, in his cold eyes. Then he turned his attention to his desk, where a fan of documents was laid out in perfect order. It was the contract for his crowning achievement, a $100 million partnership with a Singaporean energy conglomerate. This deal was his masterpiece. It would be his legacy, and now it would be his prop. "Do you have any idea what these papers are, Mrs. Rossi?" he asked, a theatrical sweep of his hand indicating the contract. Maria glanced at the desk. The pages were covered in dense, impenetrable text. "They are papers, sir," she said, her eyes downcast. "They are not papers," Arthur said, his voice dripping with condescension. He picked up the top page as if it were sacred text. "This is a legal instrument worth $100 million. I ask you, can your mind even process that number?" The zeros stretch on into an intellectual territory you could never hope to explore. He was enjoying this. The woman's discomfort, the child's silent presence. It was a small, perfect drama of his own making, confirming his place in the universe. "No, sir," Maria murmured, her gaze fixed on a point on the floor just past his polished shoes. "Of course you can't," Arthur purred, stepping closer. "And it is not your fault, not really. It is a matter of biology, of breeding. Some people are born with the capacity for complex thought, for strategy, for leadership. Others," he paused, letting the insult settle in the silent room, "are born to perform simple, repetitive tasks, to clean up after their betters." He held a page out towards her. "Look at this. Jurisdictional clauses, indemnification agreements, financial covenants. Every single sentence on this page is worth more than the sum total of every paycheck you have ever received. Tell me, Mrs. Rossi, honestly, can you understand a single word of it?" Maria's hands, rough from years of harsh cleaning chemicals, trembled slightly as she pretended to look at the document. The text was a blur of words she knew, arranged in a way that made no sense. "It is in English, sir," she stammered, "but the words are very complicated." "Complicated?" Arthur let out a short, barking laugh. "No, Mrs. Rossi. They are precise. They're the language of power, and it is a language you will never learn to speak. Your mind, you see, is simply not equipped for this kind of work." It was at that moment that Sophia took a small, deliberate step forward. She let go of her mother's hand. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy, humiliating silence, "may I please see the paper?" Arthur's monologue came to an abrupt halt. He stared at the child. He had expected fear, tears, or sullen silence. He had not expected a request. He had not expected courage. A genuine, cruel amusement spread across his face. "You," he sneered, his lips curling. "A little girl from the janitorial staff wants to read a multinational corporate contract? This is better than I could have imagined. By all means. This will serve to prove my point with a delightful clarity." With a flourish, he thrust the document into Sophia's small hands. "Go on, little prodigy. Read it. Explain to your mother what it says. Give her a glimpse into the world she will never touch." Sophia took the page. She did not flinch under his mocking gaze. She held the paper with a steady grip and began to read. Her brow furrowed, her lips moving slightly as she sounded out the complex legal terms. Arthur watched, a smug, patient smile fixed on his face, waiting for the inevitable moment of failure. He watched her scan the first paragraph, then the second. He expected her to look up with confused, defeated eyes, but she didn't. She kept reading, her expression shifting from simple concentration to one of genuine interest, as if she were not being tested, but was simply absorbing information. After a long minute that felt like an hour, she finally looked up, her large brown eyes meeting his. "This document is an agreement to form a partnership," she said, her voice calm and factual. "Your company, Blackwood Industries, will build 3 large solar power plants in Arizona. A Singaporean company called Sunstone Energy will provide the funding. The amount is $100 million. The smug smile on Arthur Blackwood's face faltered. It was as if the girl had reached into his mind and plucked out the executive summary. He felt a jolt of disbelief. It had to be a guess. A wild, lucky guess. That is a fortunate coincidence, he managed to say, his voice losing some of its confident tone. You have made a lucky guess. No, sir, Sophia replied, her tone polite but firm. It's written right here in Section 2. And in Section 4, it explains the profit-sharing model. She pointed a small finger to a dense paragraph in the middle of the page. You will give them 60% of all profits for the first 15 years of operation. After that, it drops to 40%. She looked up again. And here, in Section 7, there's a penalty clause. If the first power plant is not fully operational by June 1st of next year, your company must pay a penalty of $5 million. And another $5 million for every month it is delayed after that. Every word was accurate. Every detail was correct. It was the heart of the deal, the key points that his team of high-priced lawyers had spent 6 months negotiating. Arthur felt a strange and unwelcome sensation, a prickle of cold sweat on his neck. This child, this janitor's daughter in a worn school uniform, had just dissected his legacy-defining contract in less than 2 minutes. He snatched the paper from her hand, his movements jerky. The control of the situation was slipping away, and it infuriated him. It doesn't matter what you can read, he snapped, his voice suddenly loud and harsh. A parrot can be taught to repeat words. What matters is your place in this world. Your mother is a cleaner. She scrubs floors for a living because that is the limit of her potential. And you, he jabbed a trembling finger in her direction, will grow up and be exactly the same. My mother is not just a cleaner, Sophia said, and now her voice was not calm. It was infused with a quiet, powerful fire that made Arthur take an involuntary step back. She works 2 jobs so I can have books. She leaves for work before the sun comes up and comes home after I'm in bed. She's tired all the time, but she never, ever complains. She has more honor and works harder than anyone in this entire building. The word struck Arthur with the force of a physical impact. No one spoke to him this way, ever. A hot, dark flush of rage surged up his neck, flooding his face. This was an intolerable insubordination. This was a rebellion in the heart of his kingdom. Be quiet, he roared, his voice echoing in the vast, silent office. You insolent little brat. Your mother is a parasite. She lives off the scraps that fall from my table. And what do you create? Sophia shot back, her courage seeming to feed on his anger. You don't pour concrete. You don't design software. You don't even type your own letters. You sit in this chair and move money around, while other people, the people you call nobodies, do all the real work. The blood was pounding in Arthur's temples. He felt a dizzying, blinding fury. A child, a 12-year-old, was stripping him bare, dismantling the edifice of his entire life's philosophy. That is it, he screamed, his voice raw and shaking. Mrs. Rossi, you are fired. Do you hear me? Fired. Effective immediately. Get out of my building. I will personally make sure you never find work as a cleaner in this city again. I will have you blacklisted. Maria's face, already pale, turned ashen. The words were a death sentence to their fragile existence. Please, Mr. Blackwood, she cried, her dignity finally shattering into a desperate plea. Please, sir, don't do this. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. I will punish her. Please, I am begging you. It is too late for begging. Arthur bellowed. Now get out of my office before I have you thrown out. He spun on his heel, his mind white with rage. He would call security. He would have them escorted from the premises like common criminals. In his blind fury, he failed to see the thick, black power cable for his desktop computer that snaked across the carpet from the wall socket. His polished Italian leather shoe snagged on it. His forward momentum betrayed him. He pitched forward with a strangled cry of surprise, his arms windmilling uselessly through the air. He crashed to the floor with a heavy, ignominious thud. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. The perfectly arranged contract documents on his desk were caught in the vortex of his fall, scattering and fluttering down around him like a flock of wounded white birds. Arthur lay on the floor for a stunned moment, gasping for breath. The pain in his shoulder was sharp, but the humiliation was sharper. He, Arthur Blackwood, was sprawled on the carpet of his own office like a clumsy fool. At that precise, chaotic instant, a telephone on his desk began to ring. It was not his regular office line. It was his private, encrypted phone, a direct link to a handful of the most powerful people in his professional world. It had a distinct, urgent, pulsing chime that cut through the air like a siren. Red-faced, tangled in the computer cable, Arthur struggled to push himself up. The phone continued its insistent, demanding summons. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that it was Singapore calling. It was Mr. Chen's office. Missing this call was not an option. Maria stood frozen by the door, her face a mask of pure horror. Her first instinct was to help. Her second was to flee. She did neither. Sophia watched the scene, her expression unreadable, her young mind processing the sudden, dramatic shift in power. "Answer it!" Arthur barked from the floor, his voice a strangled gasp as he tried to untwist his leg from the cord. "I cannot, sir," Maria whispered, paralyzed by fear. "It is not my place." The phone shrilled again, its urgency mounting. Arthur's panic began to eclipse his rage. "Sophia," Maria said suddenly, her voice trembling. "Go and help Mr. Blackwood get up." But Sophia didn't move toward the fallen titan. With a calmness that was utterly surreal, she walked past him, her small feet silent on the thick carpet. She approached the massive marble desk, reached over its polished surface, and lifted the receiver of the ringing phone. "Office of Arthur Blackwood," she said, her voice as clear and steady as a news anchor's. "How may I be of assistance?" Arthur froze mid-struggle on the floor. He stopped wrestling with the cable and simply stared, his mouth agape. He was witnessing the single most audacious act he had ever seen in his life. "Hello? Hello?" A man's voice crackled urgently from the receiver. It was sharp with anxiety and a distinct Singaporean accent. "This is David Lin. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Chen. I must speak with Mr. Blackwood immediately. This is an emergency of the highest priority." Sophia held the receiver with a poise that was astonishing. She glanced down at Arthur, who was now propped up on one elbow amidst the scattered papers, his face a kaleidoscope of fury, disbelief, and dawning panic. "Mr. Blackwood is occupied at this exact moment," Sophia said, her choice of words both perfectly true and perfectly discreet. "My name is Sophia. Perhaps I could take a message or assist you directly?" Arthur's jaw hung open. She had given her name. She was engaging with the right-hand man of his most crucial business partner, as if she were a senior executive. The sheer, unmitigated gall was monumental. "Listen to me, Sophia. Listen very carefully," David Lin said, his voice tight with stress. "The situation is critical. We received a telephone call not 20 minutes ago. The man on the line claimed to be Robert Markham, your company's senior director of finance. He informed us that due to a last-minute regulatory issue, the bank account for the initial $100 million transfer had been changed. He was very insistent." "Changed?" Sophia repeated, and Arthur could hear a sharp note of analytical curiosity enter her voice. "Changed to where?" "A new account at a bank in Switzerland," the assistant replied. "He said the transfer had to be rerouted immediately. He knew many confidential details of the contract, the signing dates, the project code names, the exact transfer amount. But his manner, he seemed rushed, nervous. Mr. Chen's instincts told him something was deeply wrong. He instructed me to call Mr. Blackwood's private line immediately to verify this instruction before we initiated the transfer." Sophia's eyes darted around the floor, scanning the scattered documents. Arthur watched, his own anger and humiliation momentarily forgotten, utterly captivated by the drama unfolding. The girl knelt down, her movements fluid and unhurried. She picked up a single sheet of paper, the very page he had used to mock her mother, and studied it for a moment. "Mr. Lin," she said, her voice now firm and serious, all childishness gone. "I am looking at the final, signed version of the contract right now. Section 9, subsection B. It specifies that all fund transfers are to be made exclusively to the National Commerce Bank of New York, Manhattan Central Branch. There is absolutely no mention of any bank in Switzerland. It explicitly forbids rerouting funds to foreign accounts without a 60-day written notice. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Then it is a fraud," David Lynn exclaimed, his voice rising in alarm. "A sophisticated attempt to steal the entire $100 million. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. A cold dread, colder and deeper than any financial loss he had ever experienced, washed over him. If Mr. Chun had been less cautious, if David Lynn had not called, if this child he had just fired and insulted, had not answered the phone, he would be ruined, not just financially, but reputationally. The scandal would be the end of Blackwood Industries. "Mr. Lynn," Sophia continued, her voice a calming anchor in the storm, "can you please describe the man who called you? What did he sound like?" "He had an American accent," the assistant replied, his voice still shaky. "He spoke very quickly, trying to create a sense of urgency. He said his name was Robert Markham, and that he was Mr. Blackwood's most senior man in finance." Arthur's mind, finally kicking back into gear, raced. Robert Markham. He knew that name. A junior analyst. A nobody from a marketing department. He was not in finance. He was not senior. And most importantly, only 5 people in the entire company had authorized access to the final version of the Singapore contract. "Sophia, give me the phone now," Arthur grunted, finally scrambling to his feet and brushing the dust and humiliation from his suit. But the girl held up a small, placating hand, a gesture of command so natural and unassuming that, incredibly, he obeyed it. "Mr. Lynn," she said into the receiver, "please be assured that no changes have been made to the contract. The transfer should be made exactly as stated in your copy of the documents. To the National Commerce Bank of New York. The account number is—" She glanced at the paper again, her eyes tracing the line of text. 745821009. "Wait a moment," David Lynn said, a note of sheer astonishment in his voice. "You are reading the account number directly from the document? How do you have it?" "I am reading it from the contract, sir," Sophia answered simply. It fell on the floor. "And you are? Who are you exactly?" the man asked, his confusion palpable. "Where is Mr. Blackwood?" Sophia looked up at Arthur, who was now standing beside the desk, his face pale, his mind reeling from the impossible turn of events. "I am Mr. Blackwood's personal assistant," she said after a heartbeat's pause, the lie delivered with the unshakable confidence of a seasoned diplomat. "He is currently in a very important meeting that could not be disturbed, even for this." Arthur opened his mouth to object, to snatch the phone and reclaim his authority, but David Lynn was already speaking, his voice flooding with relief and gratitude. "Well, Miss Sophia, please extend Mr. Chen's and my deepest, most sincere gratitude to Mr. Blackwood, and especially to you. Your vigilance and quick thinking have just prevented an unprecedented financial catastrophe. This theft, it would have bankrupted Sunstone Energy." "Of course, Mr. Lynn. I am glad I could help," Sophia said. "Can you recall anything else about the fraudulent call? Any other detail, no matter how small, might help us identify the person responsible on our end?" Arthur just stared. He was no longer just watching. He was learning. This child, whom he had dismissed as genetically inferior, was conducting a masterclass in crisis management. "Well," the assistant mused, "he seemed to have an answer for everything. He knew the project names, the initial transfer schedule. But I did ask him one question to test him. I asked him to confirm the exact penalty amount for project delays." He hesitated for a moment. Sophia's eyes darted back to the paper in her hand. "And did he give you the correct penalty amount?" she asked. "He said it was $10 million for each month of delay." "It is $5 million, Sophia said with unwavering certainty. "The contract clearly states a penalty of $5 million. That was a late-stage negotiation." "Precisely," David Lynn said, excitement in his voice. "So he must have been working from an outdated draft of the contract, not the final signed copy. This is a critical piece of information." Arthur's mind lit up. The girl was right. The penalty had been a major sticking point. The final concession from 10 to 5 million had happened only in the last week. and the document had been updated and circulated to an extremely limited group. This narrowed the list of suspects dramatically. In 5 minutes of calm, logical questioning, this 12-year-old girl had gathered more actionable intelligence than his entire corporate security division would have in a week. "Mr. Lin," Sophia asked, one final question. "Did the caller mention a timeline? When did he demand the money be transferred?" Yes, he was extremely insistent on that point. He said the transfer had to be completed before the close of business in New York today, claiming a new international regulation was taking effect tomorrow. He said any delay would jeopardize the entire deal. Sophia glanced at the large digital clock on Arthur's wall. It was 4:15 p.m. "That is also highly suspicious," she noted. "The contract schedules the first transfer for next Tuesday to allow for all international banking protocols to be observed." "You are absolutely right, Miss Sophia," the man said, his voice now filled with open admiration. "You are remarkably sharp. May I be so bold as to ask your age? You handle yourself like a veteran financier." "I'm 12 years old," Sophia answered, with simple honesty. A profound silence descended on the other end of the line. Arthur could almost hear the man's brain trying to process the information. 12. David Lin finally choked out, his voice a squeak of disbelief. "A 12-year-old girl just saved my company $100 million. I just read the document carefully," Sophia said, a touch of modesty in her voice now. "And I listened." Arthur felt the last foundations of his arrogant world crumble into dust. The entire edifice of his life, his belief in his own innate superiority, his contempt for the little people, was a fraud. It had been exposed and demolished in a matter of minutes by a child with a library card. "Listen, Miss Sophia," the voice on the phone said, regaining its professional tone. "I appreciate your help more than I can say, but I must now speak with Mr. Blackwood personally. This is a security breach of the highest order, and we need to coordinate our next steps." Sophia held the phone out to Arthur. Her face was calm, her hand steady. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice formal once more. "The call is for you." With a hand that trembled almost imperceptibly, Arthur took the receiver. "David, this is Arthur Blackwood," he said. His own voice sounded hollow and distant to him, like an echo from a well. "Mr. Blackwood, my God, what is happening in your office?" David Lin's voice was a torrent of relief and confusion. "Who is this girl? She is an absolute genius. She single-handedly prevented a $100 million wire fraud." I'm trying to understand that myself, David," Arthur admitted, the honest words feeling strange and brittle in his mouth. "Listen to me, Arthur." The man's voice became sharp and focused. "Someone on your senior team has betrayed you. They have access to highly confidential information, but as the girl cleverly deduced, not the final signed contract. You must lock down your systems and launch an internal investigation immediately. We will do the same on our end." "Yes, of course, David," Arthur replied, his mind slowly beginning to function again. "I will handle it personally. Right now." "And Arthur," David added before he could hang up, "this girl, Sophia, she's truly one of a kind. I have never in my life encountered a mind like hers, in a child or an adult. If not for her, we would both be facing ruin today. You are a very lucky man." "I know," Arthur said softly, glancing at Sophia, who was now standing quietly beside her mother. "I am beginning to understand that." He hung up the phone. The click of the receiver, settling into its cradle, was unnaturally loud in the silent office. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Arthur slowly turned to face Sophia and Maria. Maria was looking at her daughter with an expression of overwhelming pride, mingled with awe and a lingering fear of the man who still held their fate in his hands. "You," Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper, the rage and arrogance completely gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling stillness. "You just saved my company. You saved my entire life's work." "I just answered the telephone," Sophia replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "No," Arthur said, shaking his head slowly, a profound weariness settling into his bones. "No, you did much more than that. You showed me in the clearest possible terms what a complete and utter fool I have been for my entire life." Maria gasped, her eyes wide with alarm. "Mr. Blackwood, please, you do not need to say such things. Please, do not be angry with us." "Be quiet, Mrs. Rossi," Arthur said, but there was no heat in his voice, only a raw, painful honesty. "I'm not angry. I am telling the truth. Perhaps for the first time since I was a boy." He walked around the massive desk until he was standing directly in front of Sophia. And then, to Maria's utter astonishment, Arthur Blackwood, the titan of industry, the ruthless king of commerce, slowly and deliberately knelt down on the plush, expensive carpet so that his eyes were level with the 12-year-old girl's. "Tell me," he asked, his voice cracked with an emotion he couldn't name, "how did you know so quickly? How did you see it was a fraud when my own partners were nearly fooled?" Sophia seemed unfazed by his posture. She considered the question seriously. "It was the details," she said, shrugging slightly. "The man was in a hurry. My mother always says that people who are telling the truth don't need to rush you. And he got the penalty wrong. It was a small thing, but it was an important thing. It meant he didn't really know what he was talking about." Arthur nodded slowly, absorbing her simple, devastating logic. "And how?" he asked, his voice softer still. "Did you learn to read documents like this? Who taught you?" "Nobody taught me," she said, as if it were obvious. "I go to the public library on Saturdays. My mother gave me a library card for my 6th birthday. She said it was the key to the whole world. I read everything I can find. I like books about business and law. They're like puzzles. I like to see how all the pieces fit together to make the world work." A wave of shame, so profound it was physically painful, washed over Arthur. For his entire life, he had believed he was a superior being, that his wealth was a direct result of his superior intellect and breeding. He had built a fortress of arrogance around a heart he had allowed to atrophy. And in the space of 15 minutes, this child, armed with nothing more than a library card and a love of learning, had displayed more intelligence, more courage, and more grace than he had ever known. "Sophia," he said, the name feeling sacred on his tongue, "I have to thank you. And more than that, I have to ask you to forgive me." Arthur Blackwood had never apologized. Not to his wife, not to his employees, not to anyone. The words were foreign, like a language he had never learned. But as he looked into the clear, honest, dark eyes of the girl who had just saved him from himself, he knew he had to speak them. "Forgive you?" Sophia asked, her brow wrinkling in genuine confusion. "For what?" "For everything I said to you and your mother," Arthur answered, his voice quiet and heavy with the weight of his 65 years of error. "For calling you names, for my arrogance, for believing that the money in my bank account made me a better person than you." Maria stared, her mind refusing to compute the scene before her. The most feared man in New York City was on his knees, begging her daughter for forgiveness. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, tears now streaming silently down her cheeks. "You don't have to do this." "No," Arthur said, his voice sharp as he slowly pushed himself back to his feet. "I do. For my whole life," he said, turning to gaze out the window at the city he had once thought he owned, "I believed I was a builder. I tore down factories that employed hundreds. I demolished entire neighborhoods of homes to put up towers like this one. I told myself it was progress. I told myself I was a creator." He turned back to face them, his face a mask of bitter self-realization. "But I was never a creator. I was a destroyer. A parasite, just as you said, Sophia. A man who fed his own ego by taking from others. In 15 minutes, you did more good than I have in my entire life. You saved jobs. You saved 2 companies. You saved a foolish old man from his own pride." He strode back to his desk and jabbed the intercom button. "Helen, give me Tom Miller, head of security. In my office. Now." While they waited, Tom Miller, the head of security, a stern man with watchful eyes, entered the office. Arthur, with Sophia's quiet assistance, laid out the details of the fraud attempt. He relayed Sophia's brilliant deduction. The thief had access to early drafts, not the final contract, and had used the name of a low-level employee. "The girl is right, sir," Tom said, a look of grudging respect on his face as he glanced at Sophia. This narrows it down considerably. The final contract changes were only circulated to the 5 senior partners on the deal and the lead counsel. But the drafts were accessible to the entire legal department. We need to cross-reference access log for the draft files with the employee directory to see who might know Markham. And check the copy room logs, Sophia added quietly from the side. He might have printed a copy. Tom nodded. Good thinking, kid. I'll get on it right away. As the security chief bustled out, Arthur sat down heavily in his vast leather chair. He felt like a king who had just discovered his crown was made of cardboard. You should be running this company, he said to Sophia with a wry, tired smile. An hour later, Tom returned. His face was grim. We found him, sir. A junior lawyer. Stephen Miller. Young, ambitious, and over his head with gambling debts. We pulled his network logs. He accessed the draft contract 17 times in the last month. And he ran a search in the employee database for analysts in non-financial departments. That's how he picked Robert Markham's name. Have him brought to my office, Arthur commanded. When the young lawyer was ushered in, his face was pale with terror. He saw Arthur, then Maria and Sophia, and his composure crumbled. He confessed everything. The plan, the phone call, the desperate hope of diverting the funds to an untraceable account. After security had led the disgraced lawyer away, a heavy silence settled over the office once more. Arthur looked at the mother and daughter who had, in the course of a single afternoon, completely dismantled and then saved his world. He cleared his throat. Mrs. Rossi, he began, his voice formal but devoid of its earlier coldness. Firstly, you're not fired. I would be honored if you would continue to work in this building. Secondly, I am a man who has spent his life taking. I need to learn how to give. He took a deep breath. I am establishing a charitable foundation. Its mission will be to provide educational opportunities for underprivileged children in this city, to build libraries, fund scholarships, and create programs that give children like Sophia the tools they need. I am capitalizing it with an initial endowment of $100 million. He looked directly at Maria, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. I want you to be its executive director. You will run it. You will decide where the money goes. Your salary will be enough that you will never have to work 2 jobs again. Maria swayed on her feet, clutching her daughter's arm for support. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then Arthur turned to Sophia. And you, he said, his voice soft with an emotion that felt like reverence. I want you to be my personal advisor on this project. After school, I want you to come here, and I want you to teach me. Teach me how to see the world the way you do. Teach me how to do good. He paused. In return, I will pay for your education. Any school, any university, anywhere in the world. You will never have to worry about money again. I don't want your money, Sophia said quietly. Arthur flinched, but the girl continued. I just want you to build a library. A strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through Arthur's chest. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a small boy. It felt like hope. Then we will build the library, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We will build 100 libraries. 1 year later, Arthur Blackwood's office on the 90th floor was a different world. The cold, abstract paintings were gone, replaced by framed photographs of smiling children in new classrooms, architectural plans for community centers, and a large, detailed map of the city dotted with colored pins, each one marking a project of the New Hope Foundation. Maria Rossi, no longer in a janitor's uniform, but in a simple, professional business suit, stood by the map, pointing to a pin in the South Bronx. The clinic in this neighborhood is seeing twice the number of patients we projected. Arthur, she said, her voice confident and clear. We need to approve funding for 2 more doctors and a nurse practitioner. Do it, Arthur said without hesitation. He was sitting at his desk, but he wasn't looking at stock tickers. He was reviewing a proposal for a music program in an underfunded school. Sophia, now 13 and an inch taller, sat opposite him in one of the leather chairs, which no longer seemed so intimidating. She was doing her calculus homework, but she looked up. Mrs. Gable's grandson goes to that school, she said. He wants to learn the violin. Arthur smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and softened the hard lines of his face. In the past year, he had learned the names of Helen's children. He had learned the name of Mrs. Gable's grandson. He was learning, slowly and painstakingly, how to be a human being. He had become a different kind of builder. He was no longer raising monuments to his own ego. He was laying foundations of hope. The New Hope Foundation, under Maria's tireless and compassionate direction, had become one of the most effective charitable organizations in the city. And Sophia, his young advisor, was its soul. She had a wisdom and clarity that continued to astonish him. She was his compass, his conscience, the steady hand that guided him toward a better version of himself. One evening, he and Sophia were the last ones in the office. They stood together at the great window, looking down at the glittering tapestry of the city lights. A year ago, Arthur said quietly, more to himself than to her, "I stood here and I saw nothing but ants. An insignificant mass of people I held in contempt." He shook his head. "Tonight, I see something different. I see homes. I see families. I see a million stories, a million struggles, a million dreams." He turned to her. "You did that, Sophia. You gave me new eyes." "You always had them," she replied, her own gaze fixed on the city below. "You just had to learn how to use them." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of comfortable, paternal affection. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "You didn't just save my company. You saved my life." Sophia smiled up at him, a flash of the same fierce, intelligent light he had seen that fateful afternoon. "I didn't save you, Arthur," she said. "I just answered the phone." That night, as he rode the elevator down from the 90th floor, Arthur Blackwood felt a sense of peace he had never known. He was no longer the lonely king in his castle in the sky. He was just a man, one of many, who had finally found his purpose. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that building a library was infinitely more valuable than building a tower. He was at last a rich man. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive stories.